I'm Rachel, 28 years old, and until 6 months ago, I was the golden child of the prestigious Morrison family. My father, David Morrison, built Morrison and Associates into Chicago's most respected accounting firm. My mother, Catherine, dedicated her life to maintaining our family's impeccable social standing. Everything changed when I discovered something that would tear our family apart forever. Growing up in our Lincoln Park mansion meant living under constant pressure to excel. Excellence wasn't encouraged in the Morrison household, it was demanded. My father often reminded me that Morrisons don't accept mediocrity, while my mother scrutinized every aspect of my appearance and behavior. A Morrison lady never shows weakness, she would say whenever I displayed any emotion she deemed inappropriate. My older brother Daniel followed our father's path seamlessly, joining the family firm after graduating from Northwestern with an MBA. He became the heir apparent, never questioning the family legacy or the methods used to maintain it. I chose a different route, pursuing journalism at Columbia University, much to my parents' disappointment. Journalism is for people who can't build anything substantial, my father once told me during a tense family dinner, despite his disapproval. I worked at the Chicago Tribune for 3 years before reluctantly joining Morrison and Associates as their communications director. For 2 years, I tried to prove my worth while handling the firm's public relations and client communications. My position gave me access to various company documents and client interactions, which would later prove crucial. Sarah Chen had been my closest friend since college. We bonded over late-night study sessions and shared dreams of changing the world. Through our respective careers, she joined Morrison and Associates a year after I did, working in the audit department. My family embraced her immediately, with my mother often saying Sarah was practically a Morrison. She became a regular at family gatherings, joining us for holidays and summer vacations at our Lake Michigan house. My uncle Robert, my father's younger brother and the firm's legal counsel, had always been different from the rest of the family. He encouraged my independent thinking and occasionally defended me during family disputes. The firm needs fresh perspectives, he would argue. Rachel brings valuable insights. However, his support seemed to waver in recent months, and I noticed his warmth toward me cooling considerably. The breaking point came 8 months ago when I was preparing press materials for our annual client appreciation event. While reviewing client files to write success stories, I discovered some troubling inconsistencies. Several major clients had audit reports that didn't match their public financial statements. Tax returns showed different numbers than what was filed with regulatory agencies. When I brought these concerns to my father, his reaction was swift and harsh. "Those files are confidential and beyond your clearance level," he snapped, taking the documents from my hands. "Your job is communications, not auditing. Stick to writing press releases and leave the real work to qualified professionals." His dismissive response troubled me, but what happened next was worse. Over the following weeks, I noticed my access to client files became increasingly restricted. My brother Daniel began attending meetings I had previously organized. My questions about company practices were met with hostility or complete dismissal. The family dynamic shifted, and I found myself increasingly isolated within my own workplace. Sarah's role became more prominent during this period. She was suddenly attending high-level meetings and had access to files that were now restricted from me. When I asked her about the changes, she deflected with vague explanations about restructuring and confidentiality protocols. The final straw came when I accidentally received an email meant for Daniel. It was from a client expressing concerns about discrepancies in their tax filings and asking for immediate clarification. The email referenced adjusted figures and mentioned previous discussions about creative accounting methods. I forwarded a copy to my personal email before the system administrators could delete it from my account. That same week, I landed Morrison and Associates' biggest client account, Ever Lakefront Development Group. Instead of celebrating my achievement, my father immediately became suspicious. "How exactly did you convince them to choose us?" he demanded. "What promises did you make?" "I created a comprehensive proposal highlighting our expertise and track record," I replied, stunned by his accusation. "I did my job. Your job is to support this family's interests, not build your personal portfolio," he retorted. 2 weeks later, I made the decision to resign from Morrison and Associates and start my own public relations firm, taking several client relationships with me. The family's reaction was immediate and brutal. My mother stopped taking my calls. Daniel sent a scathing email accusing me of betrayal. My father threatened legal action for client poaching, though his lawyers advised against pursuing it, only. My cousin Jessica maintained contact, occasionally meeting for coffee and providing glimpses into the family's discussions about me. They talk about you like you're the enemy now, she confided during our last meeting. Something major is happening at the firm. Everyone seems on edge. Thanksgiving had always been sacred in our family. My mother spent weeks planning every detail from the menu to the table decorations. My father used the occasion to reinforce family loyalty and unity. Despite our estrangement, I never imagined they would exclude me from this tradition. I called my mother the week before to confirm arrangements. "The usual time, dear," she said coolly. 3 o'clock sharp, and please dress appropriately. Her tone concerned me, but I attributed it to typical maternal criticism rather than a warning of what was coming. Thanksgiving morning arrived with crisp autumn air and golden sunlight streaming through my downtown apartment windows. I felt cautiously optimistic about reconciling with my family. The night before, I had baked my father's favorite apple crisp using my grandmother's recipe, hoping this gesture would help bridge the gap between us. I spent considerable time choosing my outfit, finally settling on a navy blue dress that my mother had once complimented. I styled my hair conservatively and applied minimal makeup, knowing she disapproved of anything too bold. Every choice was calculated to minimize criticism and maximize the possibility of reconciliation. The drive to Lincoln Park took 25 minutes through light holiday traffic. During the journey, I rehearsed conversation topics that might smooth over our differences. I would ask Daniel about his recent promotion, compliment my mother on her table setting, and discuss the Bears season with my father, anything to avoid contentious topics. As I approached our tree-lined street, I noticed an unusual number of cars parked near our house. I recognized Sarah's silver Honda immediately, which surprised me since she typically arrived with me in previous years. I also spotted Uncle Robert's BMW, Daniel's Tesla, and several vehicles belonging to family friends and business associates. I parked around the corner and checked my reflection one final time before gathering the apple crisp and a bottle of wine from a grateful client's vineyard. The November air carried the scent of wood smoke and roasting turkey from neighboring homes. Through our house's tall windows, I could see people moving about in the warm glow of candles. My heart raced as I climbed the familiar stone steps. Through the frosted glass panels beside our front door, I could see figures gathered in the foyer and dining room. Classical music drifted out along with the sound of laughter and conversation. I rang the doorbell, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves. The laughter inside immediately quieted. I heard hushed voices and approaching footsteps. When the door opened, both my parents stood there like sentries. My mother wore her elegant black cocktail dress with grandmother's pearl necklace, while my father was impeccable in his charcoal suit and burgundy tie. Their expressions were identically cold. "Rachel," my father said, his voice completely devoid of warmth. "What are you doing here?" Confusion washed over me. "I'm here for Thanksgiving dinner. Mom confirmed the time last week." My mother's manicured hand tightened on the doorframe. "There's been a misunderstanding. You're not invited this year." The words hit me like a physical blow. Through the gap between them, I could see into our formal dining room where the table was set with our family china and crystal. The elaborate centerpiece of autumn flowers and pine cones dominated the center. Around the table sat familiar faces: Daniel in his navy blazer, Uncle Robert with his usual scotch, and most shocking of all, Sarah occupying what had always been my seat. All conversation had stopped. Everyone was staring at the scene unfolding. At the door, some faces showed discomfort, others curiosity, and a few, including Sarah and Daniel, displayed what looked disturbingly like satisfaction. Sarah quickly averted her eyes when our gazes met. "But I brought dessert," I said weakly, the absurdity of my statement hitting me as the words left my mouth. "Dad's favorite apple crisp." "That won't be necessary," my father replied coldly. "We have dessert covered. I think it would be best if you left now." I stood there, the dish growing heavy in my arms, as reality sank in. This wasn't a spontaneous decision or misunderstanding. This was planned. They had deliberately excluded me while inviting everyone else, including my best friend who now occupied my place at the family table. "Can I ask why?" I managed, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I think you know why," my mother said, barely above a whisper. Your choices have consequences, Rachel. Without further explanation, my father began closing the door. Goodbye, Rachel. Drive safely. The heavy oak door shut with finality, leaving me standing alone on the steps with homemade dessert and wine meant to be shared with family. Through the door, I heard conversation resume, though more subdued than before. Someone turned up the music, as if to drown out any lingering awkwardness from my dismissal. I stood there for several moments, too shocked to move. Pride kept my shoulders straight as I turned and walked back down the steps, refusing to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. Once in my car, I placed the apple crisp carefully on the passenger seat and gripped the steering wheel, staring back at the house where I had grown up. Through the bay window, I could see the dining room where my family and former friends were now gathering around the table. My father stood at the head, carving turkey with surgical precision while my mother directed the serving with her usual perfectionism. Sarah laughed at something Daniel said, completely at ease in my former place, the hurt that had numbed me at. The door began transforming into something else, a cold, clarifying anger that sharpened my thoughts and steeled my resolve. They had made their choice, and now I would make mine. I drove aimlessly through the city, needing distance from the scene of my humiliation. Traffic was light on Thanksgiving, and I found myself heading toward Navy Pier. I parked overlooking Lake Michigan and finally allowed myself to process what had just happened. As I stared at the gray water, a memory surfaced of Lisa Rodriguez, a former colleague from the Tribune who now worked as an investigative reporter for the Sun-Times. 3 months ago, we had reconnected at a journalism alumni event. I had mentioned my concerns about inconsistencies I'd noticed at Morrison and Associates. Do you have any documentation? Lisa had asked, her reporter instincts immediately engaged. Financial irregularities at accounting firms can indicate serious fraud. I had admitted to copying some files before leaving the firm, though I'd been too conflicted by family loyalty to examine them closely. Lisa had given me her card with a pointed message. If you ever decide to look at those files seriously, call me immediately. Some stories are bigger than family politics. Now, sitting in my car on Thanksgiving Day, completely severed from my family, I pulled out my phone and found Lisa's contact. My finger hovered over the call button for several seconds. This decision would cross a line that could never be uncrossed. Once I shared my suspicions and evidence, events would unfold that could destroy everything my family had built. The image of my parents standing in the doorway, coldly turning me away, firmed my resolve. I pressed call. Lisa answered on the second ring. Rachel, happy Thanksgiving. Is everything okay? Not exactly, I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. Remember our conversation about those financial irregularities? I think it's time I looked at those files seriously. The background noise on her end diminished as she moved to a quieter location. This sounds serious. Are you sure you're ready to pursue this? Once we start digging, there's no going back, I'm sure, I said, surprising myself with my certainty. My family just made their position very clear. Now I need to stand by my principles. I can meet you tomorrow morning, she said. Bring everything you have. We'll go through it together. That evening, I sat in my apartment surrounded by the documents I had hidden away months earlier. With a glass of wine in hand and nothing left to lose, I began methodically analyzing what I had discovered. Client files showed systematic patterns of financial manipulation. Tax returns contained different figures than regulatory filings. Audit reports had been altered to hide client losses and inflate reported gains. What initially appeared as isolated discrepancies gradually revealed themselves as components of a sophisticated fraud scheme. My father, the pillar of Chicago's accounting community, had been systematically defrauding clients for years. And he hadn't been working alone. Email chains between my father and Daniel discussed strategies for managing client expectations and adjusting reported figures to maintain confidence. The clinical language barely disguised the reality. They were running a complex scheme using new client funds to cover losses and fabricating returns to keep existing clients satisfied. More disturbing were emails that mentioned me directly. Rachel's access to the Henderson and Walsh accounts needs to be limited, my father had written weeks before I discovered the irregularities. Her communications role doesn't require this level of detail. Already handled, Daniel had replied. Sarah has helped redirect her attention to other projects. Sarah. My best friend's name appeared throughout the email chains, often in contexts that made clear she had been actively working against me for months. In one message, she wrote. Rachel asked about the Patterson discrepancies. I deflected by emphasizing client confidentiality. Should we be concerned? My father's response was chilling. Continue normal interactions with Rachel while we assess the situation. We need to monitor what she suspects and who she might contact. The realization that Sarah had been reporting on me, using our friendship as surveillance, felt like a deeper betrayal than the family's rejection. I had trusted her completely, sharing my doubts and concerns about leaving the firm. She had encouraged my independence while secretly reporting every detail back to my father. Further investigation revealed the scope of their deception. A folder labeled personal contained photographs and social media screenshots that initially seemed irrelevant. Then I noticed the recurring theme images of Sarah and Daniel together at various events, their body language suggesting intimacy beyond professional collaboration. The final photo showed them embracing at my family's lake house, clearly unaware they were being photographed. The revelation that Sarah and Daniel were romantically involved explains so much about the recent family dynamics and my systematic exclusion from company affairs. My phone rang, interrupting my analysis. It was Lisa. I couldn't wait, she said. Without preamble, I started researching Morrison and Associates after our call. Rachel, there are serious problems with some of their client accounts. The patterns suggest systematic fraud going back at least for years. I know, I replied, my voice hollow. I'm looking at the evidence right now. There's more, Lisa continued gravely. Yesterday, your family's firm held an emergency board meeting. Do you know what that might have been about? I checked my emails and found a company-wide message I had missed. Emergency restructuring meeting scheduled for 2:00 p.m. has been postponed indefinitely. Further information pending. There's something else, Lisa said. There was unusual activity in a trust fund registered under your name yesterday. Significant withdrawals requiring dual authorization. My trust fund, the account my grandparents had established that was supposed to be untouchable until I turned 30. They can't access that without my signature, I protested. Someone did, Lisa replied. We'll need to investigate potential identity theft or forgery. Rachel, I need to ask you directly. Are you prepared to go public with this story? This will trigger investigations that will almost certainly result in criminal charges against your family members. The question hung in the air between us. Despite everything, some small part of me still hesitated. These weren't just financial criminals, they were my family. My father who had taught me to drive. My brother who had defended me from bullies in middle school. My mother who had stayed up all night when I had pneumonia. But they were also the people who had stood at that door today and told me I wasn't welcome. The people who had conspired behind my back, violated my trust fund, and used my closest friendship as a weapon against me. Yes, I said finally. I'll provide everything for publication. The next morning, I met Lisa at her office downtown. We spent 6 hours going through every document, organizing evidence chronologically and by type of violation. The methodical work helped focus my thoughts and strengthen my resolve. This is bigger than I initially thought, Lisa said as we finished cataloging everything. The scope of the fraud affects hundreds of clients and involves multiple violations of federal law. This story will destroy them professionally and likely result in prison time for the main perpetrators. I understand, I said quietly, but those clients deserve to know the truth about what happened to their money. 3 days later, Lisa's expose appeared on the Sun-Times front page, prominent Chicago accounting firm accused of systematic client fraud. The article detailed the scheme's mechanics, named the principal participants, and included responses from several affected clients who had been contacted for comment. The reaction was swift and devastating. The Illinois Department of Financial and Professional Regulation suspended Morrison and Associates' operating license pending investigation. The FBI opened a criminal inquiry. Major clients immediately terminated their relationships with the firm, demanding forensic audits of their accounts. My phone exploded with messages from family members. My father's text was typically blunt. You have destroyed this family. I hope your principles comfort you when we lose everything. Daniel's message was longer and more desperate. Do you understand what you've done? This isn't just about Dad and me. Innocent employees will lose their jobs. Mom's reputation is ruined. Was your revenge really worth destroying everyone? My mother called repeatedly, leaving increasingly frantic voicemails. Rachel, whatever you think you accomplished, you need to fix this immediately. This is a family matter that should have been handled privately. Sarah's text was perhaps the most infuriating. I never meant to hurt you. Everything got so complicated with Daniel and the firm. But what you've done is unforgivable. You've destroyed people who cared about you. I didn't respond to any of them. An unexpected message came from Uncle Robert. I suspected something was wrong, but lacked the courage to investigate. You did what I should have done years ago. Be careful, they're looking for someone to blame. 6 months later, the legal consequences had largely played out. My father pled guilty to multiple counts of fraud and received a 3-year prison sentence, though he would likely serve 18 months with good behavior. Daniel faced similar charges but received probation and community service in exchange for cooperation and agreement to make full restitution to affected clients. The firm was dissolved, its assets liquidated to compensate defrauded clients. My mother retreated to our lake house, effectively withdrawing from Chicago society. Sarah found work at a small firm in Milwaukee, starting over in a junior position. I testified as a witness in several related cases, helping prosecutors understand the scheme's structure and timeline. The experience was emotionally draining but necessary for achieving justice for the victims. My own life changed dramatically. The publicity from the case attracted attention from several investigative journalism organizations. I was offered positions at major newspapers and even received an award from the Society of Professional Journalists for Ethical Courage. Most surprisingly, several former Morrison and Associates clients approached me to handle their communications and public relations needs. They appreciated my role in exposing the fraud and trusted me to help rebuild their reputations. My small PR firm grew rapidly, built on a foundation of complete transparency and ethical practices. Uncle Robert, who had cooperated fully with investigators, reached out to me 6 months after the story broke. I owe you an apology, he said during our first meeting. I knew something wasn't right, but I chose family loyalty over moral responsibility. You showed more courage than any of us. He became an unexpected ally, helping me understand the legal complexities of the case and even referring clients to my growing business. My relationship with the family remained fractured, probably permanently. My mother never forgave me for the public humiliation. Daniel and Sarah relocated to another state, trying to rebuild their lives away from the scandal's shadow. My father, serving his sentence at a minimum security facility, refused all contact. But as I prepared to host my first Thanksgiving dinner in my new home, I realized that losing my birth family had created space for something more authentic to develop. The dining table was set for 6 people: Lisa and her husband, Uncle Robert and his partner, my assistant Jennifer, who had become a close friend, and my cousin Jessica, who had maintained contact throughout the ordeal. Looking at the faces around my table, people connected not by obligation or shared genetics, but by choice and shared values. I felt a contentment that no perfectly orchestrated family performance had ever provided. These relationships, built on honesty and mutual respect rather than appearances and shared secrets, had become my true family. As we raised our glasses in gratitude, I thought about that painful Thanksgiving a year earlier when I stood rejected at my childhood home. That moment of excruciating rejection had been necessary to break the patterns that kept me trapped in toxic relationships built on lies and manipulation. The truth had been costly, but it led me to discover something I might never have found. Otherwise, authentic connections based on integrity bring deeper fulfillment than maintaining false relationships built on shared deception. Sometimes the most painful endings create space for the most meaningful beginnings, and sometimes the family you choose proves more loyal than the one you were born into.